All right, so we're diving deep today, folks, into this legendary book, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. It's practically a Bible for, well, achieving pretty much anything you set your mind to. But what's the real deal with this book? We're going to break down those big ideas, the captivating stories, and figure out how it all applies to, well, you.
You know what's really striking is how Hill dedicated over 20 years of his life to this. He was interviewing like over 500 super successful people. And it was actually Andrew Carnegie, the steel tycoon who kind of kicked off this whole thing. He believed that the secrets to success shouldn't be, like some exclusive club knowledge.
So it's like Carnegie gave Hill this massive challenge, right?
Yeah.
Crack the code of success and then share it with everyone.
Yeah, exactly. And one story that really jumps out is about Edwin Barnes. This guy was absolutely determined to work with Thomas Edison. No money, zero connections, just pure, willpower, Shows up at Edison's lab one day and declares he's going to be Edison's partner.
Whoa, hold on. He just strolls in and says, "Hey, Edison, let's be business buddies." Dude, that's pretty bold.
Oh, totally. But Edison, the guy was a master at judging character. He sees something in Barnes, right? Gives him a really basic job. But Barnes, he takes it, never loses sight of that goal, and guess what? Boom, becomes Edison's partner.
Man, that's not just luck. That's like a calculated risk. He had that burning desire, but also like a plan, even if it started small. It reminds me of how Hill keeps emphasizing definiteness of purpose. What exactly did he mean by that?
Totally crucial point. It's not enough to just wish for things, right? You got to be crystal clear. You got to know exactly what you want. Like Henry Ford and his V8 engine. Engineers kept telling him it was impossible, but Ford, he wouldn't budge. His conviction was unshakable. So he kept pushing, and eventually they figured it out.
So there's this theme we're seeing. Crazy strong desire, but also relentless action. You got to have both the fire in your belly and a roadmap to get where you're going.
And to navigate that roadmap, Hill brings in this concept of faith, not in a religious way, but as a state of mind you can develop through this thing called auto-suggestion.
Okay, auto-suggestion, that's where it gets a little mind-bendy, right? Like rewiring your brain or something.
Exactly. It's your subconscious mind is constantly taking in information, right? Most people, they kind of do it unconsciously, dwelling on doubts and fears and all that. But auto-suggestion, it's about deliberately planting those positive seeds, repeating affirmations, visualizing success, that kind of thing.
So instead of thinking, I'll never get that promotion, you'd say, I'm totally capable and I deserve that advancement.
You got it. Might feel a bit silly at first, but the more you do it, the more those thoughts, they take root in your subconscious and they start influencing your beliefs and your actions. There's even a story in the book about this young preacher who used this to, get this, manifest $1 million. He visualized it, believed it with all his heart, and bam, he achieved it.
That's wild. It's like training your mind to attract what you want. But Hill doesn't stop there. He brings up this idea of specialized knowledge, right? You can't just wish your way to success. You need some substance behind it.
You're right. Desire is like the fuel, but knowledge, that's the engine. Hill emphasizes becoming a true expert in your field. Always learning, constantly getting better at what you do. He tells this story about a mobile accountant, combined his accounting skills with a really clever marketing strategy and built a thriving business.
So let's bring it back down to earth for a sec. What's a specific piece of specialized knowledge that you picked up, something that really changed the game for you?
Early in my career, I realized I was just terrible at public speaking. And in my field, that's crucial. You got to be able to communicate. So I took courses, studied all the great speakers, practiced like crazy. It completely transformed how I communicate, opened up so many doors for me.
See, that's a perfect example. You spotted a gap, filled it with focused effort, and boom, you reap the rewards. It really speaks to Hill's emphasis on honest self-assessment and then taking deliberate action.
And right alongside specialized knowledge, Hill gets into the power of imagination. He divides it into two types, synthetic and creative.
Two kinds of imagination. Interesting. Break that down for me.
Okay, so synthetic imagination, it's about taking existing ideas, knowledge you already have, and sort of rearranging them into something new. Like a chef, right, who creates a dish using familiar ingredients, but combined in a completely new way.
So it's like innovative problem solving, using what you know in a fresh way. Makes sense. Now, what about this creative imagination?
Now that taps into something deeper. Think of those aha moments, those bursts of insight that just kind of pop into your head. Hill believed these aren't random. They can be cultivated if you tap into a higher level of consciousness, what he calls the sixth sense.
Sixth sense. Hold on, we're talking like ESP here. Reading minds, predicting the future, that kind of thing.
Not exactly. Hill describes it more as a heightened awareness, a sort of intuition that goes beyond just logical thinking. He believed that by mastering those other principles, desire, faith, knowledge, you open yourself up to this faculty. It allows for these like seemingly impossible insights and connections.
Okay, so it's more about becoming attuned to this deeper level of understanding. I get it.
Yeah.
But how does this sixth sense actually work in the real world? Got any examples?
Think of Ruth Handler, the woman who created the Barbie doll. She watched her daughter playing with paper dolls, assigning them like adult roles, and that sparked a thought, right? Why not a 3D doll that embodied those aspirations? Bam, Barbie's born, and it totally revolutionizes the toy industry.
Wow, so it's about seeing beyond the surface, connecting seemingly unrelated dots, and then having the guts to actually act on that insight, right? It's powerful stuff. But Hill also talks about the importance of collaboration, this mastermind concept. What's that all about?
Yeah, absolutely essential. It's the idea that surrounding yourself with a supportive group of like-minded people, it can supercharge your efforts. Think of it as a think tank where everyone's genuinely dedicated to each other's success. Hill himself, he had this mastermind alliance with a guy named W. Clement Stone, and it led to huge achievements for both of them.
It's like that saying, right? If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
Yeah.
But what about when we hit those inevitable roadblocks? I mean, they're going to happen, right? Hill talks a lot about persistence.
Oh yeah, persistence is key, no question. He dedicated an entire chapter to it. Tells the story of R.U. Darby, a gold prospector who gave up literally 3 feet from a massive vein of gold, sold all his equipment, went home defeated, a junk dealer bought it, hired an engineer, and boom, they struck gold.
Ouch. Talk about a lesson in not giving up. But it's not just about blindly pushing through, right? There's got to be a smarter way to do it.
You're right. Hill distinguishes between blind persistence and informed persistence. It's about learning from your mistakes, adjusting how you're doing things, and never losing sight of the bigger picture.
So it's like this dance between taking action and then reflecting, constantly tweaking your strategy while staying committed to that goal, right?
Exactly. And hand in hand with persistence comes this need to conquer your fears. Hill identified 6 basic fears that he said hold most people back: poverty, criticism, ill health, losing love, old age, and death. Pretty heavy stuff.
Whoa, that's a lot to deal with.
Yeah.
But he doesn't suggest we just bury our heads in the sand and pretend fear doesn't exist, right?
No, he was all about confronting fear directly. He gives this example of a young preacher who was terrified of poverty. To overcome it, he gave a whole sermon titled, "What I Would Do If I Had $1 Million."
Interesting. So instead of focusing on what he lacked, he immersed himself in the feeling of abundance. That's a pretty powerful mental shift.
Absolutely. By focusing on what he wanted, he neutralized that fear that was holding him back. And you know what? He actually did end up making $1 million.
Wow, it really seems like Hill is highlighting this powerful connection between our thoughts and what actually happens in our lives. And it's like we have this incredible ability to shape our world through what we believe and what we do.
You hit the nail on the head. That's at the heart of his whole philosophy. He believed that the mind is the most powerful tool we have, and if we learn to master it, we can achieve pretty much anything.
Okay, so we've talked about desire, faith, knowledge, persistence, this mastermind concept, even overcoming fear. It's clear that Hill believed in a holistic approach to success, right?
Yeah.
Addressing all these different aspects of ourselves. But there's one thing we haven't really touched on yet, that mysterious sixth sense we mentioned earlier.
Ah, yes, the sixth sense. That's where Hill delves into the more, shall we say, esoteric elements of his philosophy. He suggests that it's the ultimate key to unlocking our true potential. But that's a conversation for another time.
You're killing me, leaving our listeners on a cliffhanger. But don't worry, folks, we'll be back to unravel the mysteries of this sixth sense and how it all ties into achieving those extraordinary results. All right, so we're back and ready to unpack this whole sixth sense idea. It sounds pretty mystical, but you were saying it's more about hyper intuition, right? Can you give me a real-world example of what that actually looks like?
Absolutely. You know how Hill keeps hammering on specialized knowledge being so important? Well, it's not just about memorizing a bunch of facts. It's about understanding how to apply that knowledge in a way that gets results. And sometimes that takes tapping into a deeper level of understanding. It's almost like an intuitive leap,
Okay, but that still sounds kind of vague. Get any concrete examples of this in action?
Think about Sam Walton, the guy who founded Walmart. He had this uncanny ability to understand what customers wanted, even before they knew it themselves. He'd go to these small towns, observe how people shopped, and he'd pick up on these subtle patterns that everyone else seemed to miss. He didn't just rely on, like, market research reports, you know? He trusted his gut, his intuition.
So it's about being really observant, like picking up on those little hints that other people might overlook. It's like having a sixth sense for spotting opportunities.
You got it. And it's not just in the business world either. Think about artists, musicians, inventors, all those creative types. They often talk about these moments of inspiration, these flashes of insight that seem to come out of nowhere. Hill believed those weren't just random. He thought they were the result of cultivating this sixth sense.
Okay, so how do we actually tap into this mysterious sixth sense? Is it something you're born with, or can you actually develop it?
Hill was convinced it was a faculty you could develop, kind of like working out a muscle. He saw it as like the culmination of mastering all those other principles we've been talking about. You know, the burning desire, unwavering faith, specialized knowledge, all that. As you get better at those, your mind naturally becomes more attuned to those subtle signals, those intuitive insights.
So it's like the more we work on those foundational principles, the more sensitive our radar gets.
Precisely. Hill believed the sixth sense was always there, but most people, they're just too distracted to hear it, you know? Too much noise, not enough quiet time to let those whispers come through. He always stressed the importance of silence, of making space for reflection, for those moments when inspiration can strike.
That makes me think about things like meditation or even just spending time in nature. It's about quieting all that mental chatter and becoming more receptive to those intuitive nudges.
You're exactly right. Hill was a big believer in those practices for developing the sixth sense. He also talked about keeping a journal, writing down your thoughts and dreams and those aha moments. He saw it as a way to, like, track those insights and spot patterns you might not notice otherwise.
That's a great tip. It's like creating a feedback loop for your intuition, becoming more aware of how it speaks to you. But how do we know if we're actually tapping into this sixth sense or just letting our imaginations run wild?
Hill had a simple test. He said, ask yourself, does this idea feel right? If it does, go for it. He believed the sixth sense spoke to you through this feeling of certainty, this deep knowing that goes beyond logic.
So it's about trusting that inner voice, that gut feeling that tells us we're on the right track. But what if we're wrong? What if our intuition leads us astray?
Even Hill acknowledged that the sixth sense isn't perfect. It's not like some magical crystal ball. He emphasized the importance of balancing intuition with good planning and analysis. Like, intuition's a great guide, but it shouldn't be your only compass.
Makes sense. It's about finding that sweet spot between intuition and logic, heart and mind working together. But speaking of the mind, Hill also gets pretty deep into the power of the subconscious. He seems to suggest that we're often our own worst enemies, that we sabotage ourselves without even realizing it.
That's one of Hill's most powerful insights. He saw the subconscious mind like a garden, you know. Whatever seeds you plant, that's what grows. Problem is, most people are unconsciously planting seeds of fear, doubt, all that negative stuff. They keep telling themselves they're not good enough, they'll never succeed, all that.
So we're basically setting ourselves up for failure without even knowing it.
Yeah, a lot of the time, that's exactly what we're doing. But here's the good news, we can reprogram ourselves. Hill was a huge advocate for autosuggestion, which we talked about earlier. It's about consciously choosing to plant those seeds of positivity, confidence, success.
So it's about being aware of that self-talk, catching ourselves when we start spiraling into negativity, and choosing to focus on what we want instead of what we're afraid of.
Exactly. Hill believed the subconscious mind is incredibly powerful, but it's also super susceptible to suggestion. By feeding it positive affirmations and visualizations over and over, we can start changing those deep-seated beliefs that are holding us back.
Okay, so we're tending to our mental gardens, planting those positive seeds. But Hill also talks about the importance of who we surround ourselves with, right? The company we keep. He believed that had a huge impact on our thinking and behavior. Can you expand on that a little?
He called it the mastermind principle, and he thought it was one of the most crucial tools for success. He was convinced that by surrounding yourself with supportive, like-minded people, you could amplify your efforts like crazy.
So it's not just about finding a mentor, it's about building a whole network of people who are all committed to each other's growth and success, right?
Yeah, that's the idea. Hill believed that a true mastermind group, it operates on a level of synergy, where the whole becomes greater than the sum of its parts. It's a space to brainstorm, share resources, cheer each other on, and hold each other accountable.
It makes me think about the power of collaboration, how much more we can achieve when we're working together towards a common goal. But even with the support of a mastermind group, we're still going to face setbacks. Challenges are inevitable. How do we stay motivated when things get tough?
Hill was adamant that persistence was the key to overcoming those obstacles. He had this great line. He said, "Persistence is to the character of man as carbon is to steel."
So it's about developing that inner strength, that resilience that keeps you going even when you feel like giving up.
Exactly. He was convinced that most people fail not because they lack talent or opportunity, but because they throw in the towel too soon. They let setbacks and disappointments get to them, and they lose sight of their vision.
But it's not just about blindly pushing forward, right? There's got to be more to it than just willpower.
Hill made a distinction between what he called blind persistence and informed persistence. He believed true persistence involved being strategic, learning from mistakes, being willing to change your approach, refining your methods as you go.
So it's about being flexible, adaptable, always learning as you go.
Exactly. He said, "A quitter never wins and a winner never quits." But he also emphasized knowing when to change course, when to try a different approach.
Makes sense. You got to be committed to the goal, but also open to different ways of getting there. But even with the best strategies and a super supportive network, we all have those inner demons, right? Those fears that can hold us back. How do we deal with those?
Hill devoted a whole chapter to overcoming fear. He was convinced it was one of the biggest roadblocks to success. He laid out 6 basic fears that he thought plagued most people: poverty, criticism, ill health, losing love, old age, and death.
Man, that's quite a list. But he didn't suggest we just ignore those fears or pretend they don't exist, right?
No way. He was all about facing them head on. He said, "Fear is a state of mind, and any state of mind can be controlled and directed."
So it's about understanding that fear is often an illusion, something we create in our minds that we can choose to dismantle.
Exactly. He offered a bunch of techniques for overcoming fear: autosuggestion, visualization, and this thing he called the power of decision.
The power of decision. What did he mean by that?
Hill believed that when you make a firm, unshakable decision to conquer a specific fear, you basically cut off its power source. He said, indecision is the breeding ground for fear.
So it's about taking back control, refusing to let fear call the shots.
You got it. He said, when fear comes, fight it with faith. He was convinced that faith was the ultimate weapon against fear and that you could cultivate faith through autosuggestion and visualization.
Okay, so we're facing our fears, building up our faith, mastering our minds. But there's still this one big piece of the puzzle we haven't talked about. That idea of sexual transmutation. A bit of a head scratcher, but I'm really curious to hear your take on it. We'll have to save that conversation for our last segment, though. All right, so let's tackle this sexual transmutation thing. I'll be honest, it's one of the more, shall we say, eyebrow-raising parts of Hill's book.
It definitely gets people talking, yeah. But it's super important to get what Hill was actually saying, not just the surface level. He wasn't saying to suppress your natural desires or anything. What he noticed was that a lot of super successful people, they had this intense drive, this magnetism that wasn't purely sexual, but it had that same kind of powerful energy.
So instead of just expressing it physically, he's saying you can harness that energy, transform it into something else.
Exactly. Hill uses this example of a really powerful speaker, Wow. They're not just reciting words, they're radiating this conviction, this passion, and it draws the audience in. He thought that same energy, it could fuel ambition, creativity, anything that needs that extra push, something beyond just raw talent.
Okay, I see how that connects to drive and purpose and all that. But how do you actually do this transmutation thing? It sounds a little, mysterious, like some secret society stuff.
Hill was a big believer in mental discipline. He thought most people, they're kind of slaves to their impulses, just letting their desires control them. But he thought, just like an athlete trains their body, you can train your mind to redirect that energy, do it consciously.
So it comes down to willpower, making a choice about where that energy goes instead of just going with the flow.
You got it. And how do you know it's working? Hill said you'll see this surge in creativity, you'll have tons of enthusiasm, this laser focus on your goals. It's not about becoming emotionless or anything, but it's about having those emotions fuel something meaningful, not just, fleeting pleasure.
I like that distinction. The difference between a sudden burst of energy and then a steady, powerful current that just keeps pushing you forward.
Perfect analogy. Hill believed that transmuted energy, that's what fuels not just ambition, but artistic expression, innovation, those moments where you're really pushing beyond what you thought you were capable of.
It reminds me of those entrepreneurs who seem to work nonstop. And it's not out of obligation. It's genuine passion. It's like that fire is what sets them apart.
And Hill wasn't just making this up, he studied all these super successful people and saw this pattern over and over again. They were driven by something deeper, something more than just chasing, those quick hits of gratification.
So it's not about denying who you are. It's about like refining yourself, kind of like an alchemist turning, I don't know, lead into gold.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that power you have inside and then choosing to use it for something really special. It goes back to that burning desire Hill talks about, but it's like it's now fueled by something even stronger.
Man, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
Right.
A burning desire to the sixth sense, and now this whole idea of sexual transmutation. Hill's given us a lot to think about. Any last words of wisdom for our listeners before we wrap up?
Think and grow rich, it's like a toolkit, right? But it's up to each person to actually use those tools. Self-awareness is huge, recognizing where you might be letting those powerful energies just kind of run wild. Hill truly believed we all have that greatness inside us, but we got to cultivate it.
That's a really inspiring message. It's not about luck. It's not about your circumstances. It's about taking control of your own potential.
Yeah.
And for anyone who wants to go even deeper, grab a copy of the book. It's been inspiring people for forever, and it's just as relevant today as it ever was.
And until next time, keep those minds sharp, keep those desires burning bright, and remember, the journey to success, it all starts within.